Welcome to the League of Women Voters of California Education Fund video explaining the 2024 statewide ballot measure for the March 2024 primary election. Today we are going to talk about Proposition 1. Prop 1 would allow the state to sell $6.38 billion in new bonds to build places for mental health care and drug or alcohol treatment, and supportive housing for homeless people with behavioral health challenges, like mental health, drug, or alcohol issues. The question it asks is, should a greater share of County Mental Health Services Act funding be used and new bonds issued to build treatment facilities and housing for people with mental illness and substance use disorders, as well as housing for other homeless individuals? California annually spends $2 to $3.5 billion for mental health services. These funds come from the Mental Health Services Act, MHSA, known as the Millionaire Tax, passed by voters in 2004. California's counties are granted 95% of these funds, with relative flexibility in their use for mental health services and for substance use treatment for people with or at risk of developing mental illness. Currently, total housing and treatment resources are insufficient to address these crises. As of January 2022, approximately 171,500 Californians were homeless. Of that population, approximately 75,700 are suffering from severe mental illness and/or chronic substance disorders. Another 10,400 are veterans. So, Prop 1 is proposed to authorize the state to issue bonds to raise $6.4 billion. Of that, $4.4 billion would be used to build facilities for treatment of people with mental illness and substance use disorders, and $2 billion to build or renovate housing for people who are experiencing or at risk of homelessness, or who have mental illness or substance use disorders. A portion of the money will be set aside for veterans. Under Prop 1, more of the MHSA tax money would go to the state and less to counties. Counties will have to spend more of their MHSA money on housing and support services like education and employment. They would have less to spend on treatment, crisis response, and outreach. Counties would be able to spend MHSA money on drug and alcohol treatment for anyone who needs it, not only people with a mental illness. The Legislative Analyst's Office estimates the bond would pay for building 6,800 treatment beds in new facilities and up to 4,350 housing units, half for veterans experiencing homelessness. The number of new housing units would reduce overall statewide homelessness by approximately 3%, although there are also other funding sources for such housing. And as far as its price tag, counties would annually receive approximately $140 million less in MHSA funding and would have to use a greater percentage of that funding for housing and support services and less for community-based mental and behavioral health treatment. Counties would provide more housing and personalized support services, but would have less MHSA money for their mental health services. This means counties may need to use other county, state, or federal money to keep current service levels. The cost to repay the bond from the general fund over 30 years would be approximately $310 million annually. The total cost to pay off the bonds plus interest would be $6.38 billion, plus several more billion depending on the interest rate. Supporters of Prop 1 say the bond will pay for needed housing for people who are chronically unhoused, including veterans and people with mental or behavioral health challenges. The bond will pay for needed construction and rehabilitation of psychiatric and other facilities necessary for the treatment of people with mental illness or substance use disorders. Opponents of Prop 1 say that the actual number of newly built or rehabilitated housing units would have minimal impact on reducing overall statewide homelessness. They also say that billions of dollars will be borrowed to build new locked facilities to hide the homeless, the addicted, and the mentally ill against their will. And they also say that Prop 1 reduces local funding for community and evidence-based treatment that is accessible, effective, and voluntary. Forced treatment is ineffective and associated with higher suicide risk. We hope that this summary of Proposition 1 has been helpful. To learn more about what's on your ballot, visit vote411.org for unbiased candidate information on the measures, and to learn about voting in your community.